Oh yeah, I knew I forgot something. Alright, here we go. So over the past few weeks I collected some notes on the topic of the United Front. And I thought, if anything, I guess I'll take these notes and just make a video out of it so that I have something and so that people know that my channel isn't dead. I know that I have said this numerous times by now and it's probably become kind of a meme at this point, but I truly intend to revive my channel for 2020. So I guess as a sign of goodwill I'll just make this one last video for 2019 as a kickoff for 2020. I'm going to talk about the plans for my channel in a separate video, if I manage to upload that in time, but for now, let's just talk about the United Front.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht was zum Essen, bitte sehr.
In recent years, it has become a topic of debate whether or not you are required to read theory as a leftist. And this LARPing, lazy stance against reading books really comes to shine on the topic of the United Front, I think. Because way too often I see people associating the United Front as a kind of left unity, or just a vague concept of leftists fighting against fascism and capitalism to some extent. However, to that I say, read a book. For the sake of this video, I'll mostly take a look at some writings of Georgi, Dimitrov, Ernst Thälmann, and perhaps some others. Of course, I will put links to all the texts that I'm quoting in the video description, assuming that I could find them online. The first, and probably the most important text that I want to talk about, is Georgi Dimitrov's The Fascist Offensive and the Tasks of the Communist International. In this report, Dimitrov dedicates an entire chapter to the topic of the United Front of the working class against fascism. Dimitrov, in case you don't know him, was famous for having been a member of the Comintern and for having been the premier of the People's Republic of Bulgaria for 4 years, but he is most famous for his theses on fascism, which have become widely accepted in the communist movement. So at the beginning of this chapter, Dimitrov asks the question, how can people prevent fascism from taking power, and how can people overthrow fascism once it has taken power? His answer, and I quote, "The first thing that must be done, the thing with which to begin, is to form a united front, to establish unity of action of the workers in every factory, in every district, in every region, in every country, all over the world. Unity of action of the proletariat on a national and international scale is the mighty weapon which renders the working class capable not only of successful defense, but also of successful counterattack against fascism, against the class enemy." So not only have we established that fascism is the class enemy, if that wasn't obvious enough already, but also that the United Front is the most important strategy in the fight against fascism. Further along in this text, Dimitrov details some properties and some conditions for the United Front, and this is where things get interesting. The obviously most important property of the United Front is that it creates the unity of action of all sections of the working class, regardless of the party or the organization that they belong to. Now, in its initial historical context, this was mostly supposed to suggest a unity of action between communist and social democratic workers. However, Dimitrov acknowledges that this also leaves open the possibility for anarchist, Catholic and unorganized workers to join the United Front as well. At first glance, it might sound like this creates a unity of action of contradicting powers. However, Dimitrov made sure that there's also conditions to the United Front, which is the following, and I quote, "The Communist International puts no conditions for unity of action except one, and that an elementary condition acceptable to all workers, that the unity of action be directed against fascism, against the offensive of capital, against the threat of war, against the class enemy. This is our condition." Now, because of this very condition, that it is against the class enemy, it is obvious that the United Front is in itself a proletarian movement. As a matter of fact, the United Front is an organization where workers gather and organize, not because they want to overthrow capitalism itself just yet, but because they want to overthrow one of their class enemies. One last thing that is important to consider when talking about the United Front is that communist parties in no way intend to give up any power or sovereignty when taking part in the United Front. This means that communist parties are still going to mostly agitate for their own cause and that they are going to ruthlessly critique even their own allies within the United Front, besides making little to no concessions to other parties, movements or organizations. Which makes sense, because why would they want to give up power? Why would they? Especially in a fight that is essentially their fight, and especially when they are in a united front with allies that they have reason to distrust. But I will get to this in the next segment, which is:
Reih dich ein in die Arbeiter-Einheitsfront, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
So one of the most prominent examples of the United Front, and probably just the most prominent one in general, is the anti-fascist action of Germany in the 1930s. Now I can already hear an American 40-something-year-old yell that the anti-fascist action is a communist organization. And in essence that's not wrong. At least not in Germany, and at least not in the 1930s. The Communist Party of Germany did form a united front in form of the anti-fascist action. Earlier I mentioned that sometimes communist parties that take part in a united front have allies that are rather untrustworthy, and the anti-fascist action is an example of that. While communist and social democratic workers did work together as part of the united front on several occasions on a smaller scale, the Social Democratic Party did not approve of the united front. As a matter of fact, they rejected it. So in reality, the Social Democratic workers were working against the order and interests of their own party by taking part in the united front. And on the other hand, the Social Democratic Party of Germany did not only handicap the anti-capitalist, but also the anti-fascist struggle. Since the Social Democratic Party agreed to bans on strikes, left-wing newspapers and demonstrations, while also making coalitions with bourgeois parties while Hitler was taking power. This may seem very characteristic for the Social Democratic Party for us today. However, back in the 1930s, a lot of genuinely anti-capitalist workers stood behind social democracy because they believed in it. Another conflict that arose during the formation of the anti-fascist action is that the Social Democratic Party was trying to make demands to the Communist Party in order for them to agree to the United Front. The Communist Party of Germany did obviously not give in, because the United Front isn't about left unity at all costs, but rather about the United Front as described. So the anti-fascist action as it was proposed formally never existed. Rather, the Communist Party of Germany kept critiquing the Social Democratic Party and kept agitating Social Democratic workers for the anti-fascist cause. Anyway, let's get back on topic, or this is just going to turn into another rant about social democracy, and I already have enough of those. So what are some practical aspects and practical realities to consider when forming the United Front? The United Front serves to defend the immediate economic and political interests of the working class, and it serves to defend the working class against fascism as a whole. Let's take some examples that I can make up in my head. For example, if a fascist regime cuts the wages of people working in the public sector, or lowers the minimum wage, or bans strikes, that's something that the United Front works against, because that is harmful to the immediate interests of the working class. Or of course you can think of any anti-worker reforms that fascism implements in the real world. So it's not enough to agitate for the overthrow of capitalism or the overthrow of fascism alone. We also have to make out the immediate interests and immediate demands of the working class in our current stage, which obviously varies with the time and place you live in. Another practical aspect to consider as the movement is growing is that we should not only prepare and organize the working class to defend itself from fascism, from the class enemy and from capital, but also to attack capital itself via mass strikes, for example. Because as some of you might have figured out by now, a successful united front can be a gateway into the proletarian revolution, because you are having a proletarian mass movement at your hands. But let's not talk about the proletarian revolution, that's not why you're here, and that's another topic. I'm here to talk about the United Front.
Drum links 2, 3, drum links 2, 3, wo dein Platzgenosse ist.
So let me just summarize this immensely complicated topic, so you don't get it wrong the next time someone asks you about it. So in conclusion, the United Front is an organization that is in no way affiliated with the bourgeoisie, or is proletarian for short. It's an organization that is defending the interests of the working class and fighting its class enemies. The United Front requires the unity of action of all members, organizations or parties that take part, and it's centrally organized. And on top of that, the Communist Party should always retain sovereignty. if not control. So this is basically it. I'm sure you could dive deeper into this topic and find some nuances I missed or flaws that I had, but this is what I came to after reading a couple of texts about it. And I hope that this helps everyone out there to understanding the concept of the United Front. This has been the Austrian Leninist. I sincerely hope to see you all in 2020 with new videos. And until then, Happy New Year!
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein